Okay, we can be seated. So I did get word that one of the jurors made an appointment thinking we'd be done at earlier in the afternoon on Friday because of what I stated before. So I think what we'll do on Friday, despite what I told counsel before lunch, I seem to keep changing my mind on this stuff. We'll take a 45-minute break for lunch on Friday. So if you'd rather, it's going to be really tight if you go out and buy something. If you want to bring something in, that's fine to eat over the lunch hour, or just a snack or whatever you want to do. But we'll take 45 minutes. We'll work for another 2 hours after that. Be out of here by 2:45. And that should work, I would think, for the juror and make up the time that we have lost. So with that, come on back up, Ms. Hall. You are still under oath? Mr. Bogan.
Thank you. Ms. Hall, I'd respectfully turn your attention to already admitted exhibit People's number 8. It's the email. Now, I think it's on the table in front of you.
You want to get it for her?
Yeah, by all means. I didn't.
Thank you.
Before the break, we spoke about, or you spoke about some of Dylan's concerns about going to Vallecito. Remember talking about that?
Yes.
And those included it was far away from friends, at the end of the road, in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
And another concern that he articulated to you, if I understand correctly, is that he found himself at times just sitting in Mr. Redwine's house, sitting around the house not doing anything, right?
Yes.
And that concern of his became a concern of yours, as we know from looking at People's Exhibit 8, correct?
Yes.
Because in one of your emails to Mr. Redwine, you stated, I hope you all will be able to do something while he's there. He's not real thrilled about the idea of sitting around your house. Is that what the exhibit that's been admitted says? It's on page 2, I believe, of the exhibit at the top.
Yes.
Okay. And we also know that prior to the Thanksgiving trip that Dylan had been to visit Mr. Redwine twice, correct? That
Yes.
summer/early fall. And one of those trips was during Labor Day, correct?
Yes.
And that was a trip where arrangements were made by Mr. Redwine, correct?
Yes.
And Mark, Mr. Redwine had communicated through Dylan to you about those arrangements, correct?
I really can't recall specifically how the arrangements were made.
Okay. And as you testified on direct, you've spoken to tons and tons of detectives and investigators and law enforcement, correct?
Yes.
And one of those law enforcement officers was FBI agent Joseph Funaro and FBI agent Margaret Rusin. And you spoke to them on February 11th, 2013. And I know you're processing a lot of dates and a lot of information here, but does that sound by and large correct?
I remember meeting with FBI. I just don't remember specifically when.
Do you recall telling agents Funaro and Rusin that Mark contacted Elaine for the Labor Day trip and arrangements were made for Dylan to fly to Durango? Remember telling them that?
Not specifically, but I mean, it's very possible that I could have.
And do you remember telling them Mark made contact through Dylan?
Again, I mean, I don't remember specifically.
And do you think, looking at Agent Funaro's report from that date, page 8 of 11, might jog your recollection, refresh your recollection to making those statements?
We can look at them, sure.
Permission to approach.
Yes.
Okay.
Having reviewed the report from Agent Funaro, does that refresh your recollection to making the statements that arrangements were made and that Mr. Redwine communicated through Dylan?
Yes.
Okay. Permission to approach and collect.
Yes.
Again, focusing on the Labor Day trip, you obviously got to see Dylan after that trip and live with him and talk to him, right?
I did.
And he was pleased with that trip, correct?
Yes, he was able to hang out with his friends, and he seemed to have a good time. The river was not so cold, so he spent some time on the river. And
Right, that was, go ahead.
he seemed okay.
Right, and those are the two things that you remember. He enjoyed the trip over Labor Day, got to see his friends, got to hang out by the river, because he was still able to do that, go to the river.
Yes.
And I'm going to hand you People's Exhibit 6, if I may approach.
You may.
And I'm going to respectfully ask you to turn to page 2 of People's 6. And again, People's 6 is the bubble chat, the text messages between yourself and Mr. Redwine on certain dates, correct?
Yes.
And one of the messages you received from Mr. Redwine that you testified to on direct, the first blue box down on the left. I'll ask you to read that if that's okay.
The first blue box?
On the left, yes, ma'am. First
Elaine.
blue box from the top.
Elaine, I'm wondering if you have heard from Dylan. I've been trying to reach him all afternoon.
Okay. And you got that text, and you remember getting that text, probably like no other text you've ever gotten.
I do.
And that text came in at about 16:32 military time. Can you make that out on the People's Exhibit?
It didn't print very well, but I mean, it sounds about right.
Right. You remember going back and forth with Mr. Doherty, and he said,
Yeah,
we got a bad printer.
Yeah.
Okay. And what we know also is that 16:32 for folks not in the military is 4:32 p.m., correct?
Yes.
Okay. And after you got that message, as you testified, you made a number of phone calls after that, correct?
Yes.
And some of those phone calls, as you testified to, were the sheriff's department, correct?
Yes.
And you even tried to call Dylan's phone as well, correct?
Yes.
And at 5:02 on the same day, you tried to call your attorney, Amber Harrison, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Mr. Redwine calls at 4:32. You called your divorce attorney, Amber Harrison, at 2 minutes after 5.
I don't know the time specifically, but we needed a place to stay, and she was where we
Right.
stayed.
And you've described her as a friend, but she was also your attorney.
She was.
And she had actually represented you in the custody and divorce issues regarding your son Dylan, right?
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. And she was at that time as well. And that's a poorly asked question. She represented you on that matter in August and September of that year.
Yes, she did.
Now, another thing you spoke about on direct examination when asked by Mr. Doherty was whether or not you had spoken to the media, correct?
Yes.
And you said that you had, in fact, spoken to the media, right?
Yes.
And that was because your son was missing. You wanted to bring attention to the situation, correct?
Yes.
And it looks like you had to think that through. Is there something else going on there?
No. It's just that everybody kind of arranged this for me, so I was just kind of following protocol as to what others around me thought would be good. So, like, the media would contact me, and I'd have somebody else kind of reach out to them, and then I'd reach out to them at that point after they reached out. So I had a friend of mine, Denise.
Denise Hess?
Yes.
And
she was kind of the middle person with the media.
Okay. Certainly not for all the media, I take it.
For most of it.
Okay. So, and describe for the jury who Denise Hess is, how you know her, just what your personal relationship is.
Denise was a friend of mine. Her son and my older son went to middle school and high school together, and she worked for the Pine River Times. So when I knew that we had to do more, that we weren't within the first couple of days, we couldn't locate Dylan. I contacted her to see what she could do to help me get attention for Dylan, bring him home.
And one of the things that's clear is that in the text messages that you went back and forth with Mr. Redwine is that you even tell him it's so hard for me not to suspect you right now, correct?
Yes.
And in your interactions with the media, you wanted to bring attention to the situation with your son and bring attention to your suspicions of Mr. Redwine.
My goal was to bring Dylan home.
Right. And in doing that, you wanted to bring attention to Dylan and bring attention to your suspicions of Mr. Redwine, correct?
My intention was to bring Dylan home.
And you would...
It wasn't to belittle or besmirch or anything like that. It was to get Dylan's name and face out there in case anybody in this country has seen him.
Right. And one of the things you did as part of that series of actions is you organized a protest in front of Mr. Redwine's house, correct?
No, I did not organize a protest. It was not me that organized it.
You attended a protest in front of Mr. Redwine's house?
I did.
And who organized the protest?
You know, I'm not really sure. I really don't know.
Who invited you to the protest?
I don't think it was like a written invitation. It was just everybody's going up to Mark's house so we can try and get some answers. And I think Denise was part of that.
Okay. Denise Hess, your friend,
yes, mm-hmm.
whose son played with your son, was
they went to school together.
They went to school together. Was one of the architects of the protest in front of Mr. Redwine's house.
I believe so, yes.
And that's the protest that you and Corey attended, correct?
We did.
Permission to approach with Defense Exhibit 1872, please.
Sure. Don't get too scared. Those numbers don't mean there's 1,872 defense exhibits. I don't think. Yes, it was.
Have you had a chance to look at that?
Yes.
And is that a fair and accurate representation
yes.
of the protest that you attended in front of Mr. Redwine's house?
I'm not sure I would call it a protest, but yes.
What would you call it?
A gathering?
Okay. It's a gathering, but there's several people there. But move to admit Defense 1872.
Any objection?
Your Honor, I'm not, sorry, not sure the proper foundation's been laid, but I have no objection to this coming to evidence.
All right, it's admitted. Do you want to publish it?
Permission to publish?
Yes.
I don't know if the TV's on.
TV needs to be turned on, probably.
Does that look like the 1872 in front of you, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. And this is what you've described as a gathering in front of Mr. Redwine's house, correct?
Yes.
And that was in February of 2013, that winter?
That sounds about right.
Okay. And obviously the photo portrays, are you in that photo? Do you see your sign and yourself?
Yes,
Okay. So you're there. Do you see your other son, Corey, there as well?
I do.
Okay. And safe to say those are people in front of Mr. Redwine's house with signs and placards for the gathering, as you described it, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How long did that event go for, do you recall?
It was pretty cold out that day, so an hour, maybe?
And again, it's your recollection that Denise Hess, your friend who's the journalist at the Times, is that the Pine River Times?
Yes,
That she was one of the architects of this.
I believe so, yes. It was kind of hazy, but yeah, I think she was part of that, yeah.
I'm going to take that down. We're going to go one. Was Denise Hess the architect of your appearances on national television,
Yes,
including the Dr. Phil show, as you acknowledged on Direct?
yes,
And was she the architect of you going on the broadcast True Crime Radio?
yes,
And was she the architect of you going on several news channels?
yes.
And safe to say, you told a lot of people about what was going on with Dylan and his disappearance, correct?
A lot of people?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, I spoke to a lot of people. I told everybody who would listen that my son is missing.
Right. And you also told a lot of people that you believed Mr. Redwine was responsible, correct?
I'm not sure I said that, but I believed then that he was the last person to see Dylan, and he had no answers for us, and he was refusing to ask or answer any questions or help us find Dylan, and it was frustrating.
But my question is, you told a lot of people that you thought he was responsible for Dylan's disappearance, correct?
I'm not sure I would say it like that, no.
Okay.
Can I see both counsel just for a second? Yeah, I'm going to make a record first and instruct the jury, but then I will. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to make sure that we don't have any problems with this trial, so I am directing Mr. Doherty to speak to Ms. Hall about certain legal matters that she needs to remember during her testimony and her cross-examination. So,
Your Honor, just for the record, that's with consent of counsel.
That's correct. We talked about that up at the bench.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, we're all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I proceed?
Please.
Ms. Hall, we were talking about whether or not you had told a lot of different people, a lot of different sources that you believed Mr. Redwine was responsible for Dylan's disappearance. Remember talking about that a few moments ago?
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is that you had told a lot of people that you believed Mr. Redwine was responsible, correct?
A lot of people is pretty general, but okay. I mean, I did speak with, media, friends, family, about my son and, that he came to Durango and he never came home.
And since you're equivocating, you testified about...
Objection, Your Honor.
And your objection is?
Counsel has a question. I would propose that it be asked as opposed to defining what the witness is doing.
Withdrawn.
Okay. Thank you.
Based upon your last answer, you've testified about Mr. Redwine previously, correct? In other civil matters, correct?
I've testified against him.
You've testified in court proceedings, correct?
I have testified in court proceedings, like...
Regarding you and Mr. Redwine, correct?
Yes, I find your answer or your questions to be very generic, so I'm trying to...
I know. You've testified about this before on June 11th, 2014, correct? In El Paso County. I'm sorry for interrupting.
In El Paso County. Yes.
Okay.
If that was the date. I don't recall the date specifically, but...
Okay. And again, you've told the jury that that's not how you would put it, that you told a lot of people that you believe Mr. Redwine is responsible, correct?
I've always said that I believe that he had a hand in Dylan's disappearance, yes.
Okay. And you've told that to a lot of people?
Okay, sure. I mean...
You don't have to go anymore. They know your answer.
Thank you.
You don't need to ask it anymore.
And you've gone on national television and iterated that opinion, correct?
Yes.
And you've iterated that opinion to law enforcement, correct?
Yes.
And you've iterated that opinion to Facebook platforms, correct?
Yes.
And was Denise Hess the architect of your communications on Facebook as well?
Sometimes. I really tried to stay away from Facebook because it was very emotional, and I didn't want to get into the social media tit for tat. So my involvement in Facebook was pretty minimal.
Okay. But you did just acknowledge that you had told people on a Facebook platform you thought Mr. Redwine was responsible, correct?
Yes.
And do you recall what platforms those were where you iterated your opinion that Mr. Redwine was responsible for Dylan's disappearance?
Not specifically, because I never really went out to like a page or anything and said, you know, he's responsible. I made comments on a post or something, but.
So do you recall if you made those comments on the Facebook page, Warriors for Dylan?
No, I don't recall.
Do you recall if you made those comments on a Facebook page, Journey to Justice?
No, I don't recall. I don't.
Did you make those comments to the Facebook page, Collective and Objective Voice for Dylan?
Honestly, it was so long ago, I don't remember.
Do you recall making any comments on the Facebook page, Arrest Mark Redwine?
No.
Do you recall making any comments on Arrest Imprison Mark Redwine Facebook page?
No.
As the case went on, you had several meetings with law enforcement, obviously, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, at times, law enforcement would make arrangements to have a special meeting with you to let you know what was going on with the case, correct?
Yes.
And at those times, they would inform you what they could about what was going on with the investigation, correct?
Never to my satisfaction, but yes.
Right, and you actually grew frustrated with that process, right?
I did.
Because you wanted to know.
Wanted to know where my son was, yes.
And as this case progressed, you got to know some of the investigators pretty well, correct?
I don't know what you mean by pretty well, but yes, I mean.
You became close with some of the investigators.
Yes.
Because you had a shared mission with them.
Our focus seemed to be the same, yes.
Right.
Which is to find Dylan.
And after Dylan was found, what was that focus that you shared with law enforcement?
Finding out who could have harmed my sweet boy.
Right. And your opinion that Mr. Redwine was responsible didn't change during this process, did it?
No.
One of the investigators, well, hold on. You testified earlier today that you drove Dylan to the airport in Colorado Springs, correct?
Yes.
And that was on November 18th, 2012, correct?
Yes.
And you picked him up at Joe Sabalos' house, correct?
Yes.
And I take it, we'll describe that process when you picked him up from Joe's house. Did you have to go to the door, or?
I went to the door and rang the doorbell, and he was ready to go.
And the two of you walked out to your car, I take it?
Yes.
And was Kristen Baird there?
I don't recall. I don't remember. They were always together, but I don't recall if on that specific day she was there.
Okay. And safe to say, this is a day you remember this is the day you took down to the airport to come down here, right?
Yes.
And you described in detail that day for the jury.
Yes.
And it doesn't sound like you have a recollection of Kristen Baird being there when you walked Dylan to the car.
I don't recall. I mean, I really don't remember if she was there or not.
And then you also testified on direct about what your recollection was about what Dylan took with him on the trip.
Yes.
And your testimony was I think he had a black hoodie, correct?
I don't know if it was black.
Okay.
Because he had several hoodies. That was what he preferred over a coat. Actually, it may have been a maroon hoodie. I don't remember specifically what color it was. Actually, I think he had two hoodies. And
did you watch him pack for the trip to Bayfield, Durango?
Somewhat. I sat down on his bed with him while he was packing and just kind of reminded him of things that he needed to pack. And then I made sure that the items I felt were important for him to pack were packed.
Okay. So, and I believe you testified on direct that him being a 13-year-old young man, he was more inclined to try and pack himself.
He was, and he did pack himself. But I wasn't going to fight with Dylan over whether to bring pants or shorts or whether to bring a coat or a hoodie. Like I said, I made sure that he had like a pair of pants because he wore shorts even in the winter. Made sure he had his cell phone and his charger and his wallet so he could have some money while he was in the airport, things like that. But I didn't look at like specific clothing that he packed.
And again, your testimony today is that you were there sitting on the bed with Dylan, making sure he was packing the things that you thought were important for the trip, right?
I made sure, yes, those things that were packed, yes, in his bag.
And again, as we've discussed already, you've met with tons of law enforcement, done tons of interviews in this case, correct?
Yes.
And one of the investigators you've spoken to is Investigator Tanya Goldbright, correct?
Yes.
And you met with her on November 23rd, 2012, correct? And I know I'm asking.
I don't recall the specific date, but I remember meeting with her in November.
Okay. And, well, do you recall telling Tanya Goldbright on November 23rd, 2012, that you were not sure what all Dylan packed for his visit, as he was old enough to pack his own bag?
I don't remember specifically saying that, but.
Would looking at Investigator Goldbright's report, page 57 of Discovery, help jog your memory?
Probably not, because I'm pretty familiar with, you know, what we did, he and I together, as far as packing. And I guess you can take that context separate way, in many different ways. I helped Dylan get the things I thought were important, but Dylan did pack his own bag.
And you made that statement, and I get what you're saying, but my question is, do you recall telling Investigator Goldbright that you were not sure what all Dylan packed for his visit, as he was old enough to pack his own bag?
I don't recall specifically saying that, but okay. I could have.
As the case went on, you also informed law enforcement that you had friends in Vallecito who were watching Mr. Redwine, correct?
I don't know. I mean, I really never met a lot of these people until Dylan went missing. I really didn't have any friends in Vallecito.
Did you identify Miss Carrie Cochrane to law enforcement?
Yes, Carrie. I did forget about Carrie. Carrie was a neighbor of Mark's that Mark and I and the boys had all gone over to her house and had dinner and such. So.
And
I did call Carrie, yeah.
Right. And do you recall informing Investigator Goldbright that Carrie Cochrane, whom you knew, was watching Mr. Redwine closely?
I don't recall saying that.
Would looking at Investigator Goldbright's report from the 23rd, 2012, help you recall if you told her that?
I mean, I guess. I don't know how to respond to that, because I may have said that. I know, you know, that was right around the time Dylan went missing, and I was desperate, and I was reaching for anyone that could help me, you know, give me some information about Dylan.
And as part of that process, you informed law enforcement that Carrie Cochrane was watching Mr. Redwine very closely.
I don't remember saying that she was watching him very closely. I could have said that. I truly just don't remember.
Do you know who Kathy Berry is?
Yes.
Can you describe for the jury how you know her?
I met her through Dylan's disappearance. She came down from her home in Evergreen, I think, to participate in the search for Dylan.
And was she someone who you knew prior to your son going missing?
No.
Okay. And did you foster any kind of personal relationship or friendship with her?
Yes, we have become close over the years.
Okay. can have one moment, Judge.
You may.
Permission to approach and turn her attention to Exhibit 7.
Yes. People 7?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's safe to say People 7 is the bubble chat, the text between you and Dylan on the 18th, correct, of November?
Yes.
And you can take it out of the plastic folder there. I think that may help to see what it is. And one of the comments you make to Dylan in the second green box from the bottom was, make your dad wait, laugh out loud, right?
Yes.
And that's just kind of, what's going on with that comment?
Well, I was obviously worried about Dylan getting there and Mark not being there. So I wanted to make sure, I didn't want Dylan waiting on Mark. I wanted Mark waiting on Dylan for pickup. I didn't want Dylan standing outside an airport and Mark not be there.
And obviously, as is your right, you watched the proceedings in this case, correct? You watched the trial so far.
Yes.
Including the video of Mr. Redwine picking up Dylan there in the airport and meeting him. Okay. And you're aware of the compromising photos as well, correct?
I am.
And those have been shown to you by Corey and other sources, correct?
Yes.
And as you sit here today, you have no personal knowledge, you've never observed, you've never heard of Dylan confronting Mr. Redwine with those photos.
I've never heard of Dylan confronting Mark with those photos yet.
Nothing further, Judge.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I'm going to take you through a couple topics that defense counsel covered in cross-examination, okay? So with regards to the trip to the airport when you're dropping Dylan off,
yes,
that was November 18th, 2012.
yes,
You recall going the day before, November 17th, 2012, for the flight that was canceled.
yes,
There's actually two trips to the airport.
yes,
You testified on cross-examination that you recall making sure Dylan packed his phone and charger and iPod and charger.
yes,
You recall also telling the FBI when they interviewed you that Dylan brought his iPod and charger as well as his cell phone and charger.
yes.
Counsel had asked you about the Labor Day trip and asked whether Dylan had a good time. He showed you a report from the FBI. Do you recall that on cross-examination?
Honestly, that sometimes in my brain it gets confusing as to who is FBI, who is Plata, who is Bayfield. So I'm trying to keep it all straight, but it does kind of mesh together in my brain.
Okay. you recall counsel showing you the report during cross-examination about the Labor Day trip?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to refer to the same report, the same paragraph, same Labor Day trip.
Okay.
Recall telling the FBI that Dylan was happy with the trip because he got to see his friends.
Yes.
Recall telling the FBI at one point during the Labor Day trip, Dylan contacted you to tell you that Mark was at the Ignacio motorcycle rally, that Dylan was stuck alone at the Vallecito house.
Judge, I'm going to object. That's a different FBI report than the one that I was talking to the witness about, and I can show counsel what I'm talking about.
Well, why don't you show, because I certainly have no idea.
Well, I could rephrase the question, John, and perhaps save us the...
Well, you can try, as long as Mr. Bogan's listening.
Do you recall telling the FBI that during the Labor Day trip, Dylan contacted you to tell you that defendant was at the Ignacio motorcycle rally, and that Dylan was stuck alone at the Vallecito house?
Do I remember telling the FBI that?
Or do you remember that?
I remember that, yes.
Do you recall Dylan contacting you during that same Labor Day trip and asking you to have a friend of yours pick him up from that house?
Yes. And it wasn't his house. It wasn't the Vallecito house. It was actually in Bayfield. He was stuck in Bayfield.
He being
Dylan.
was stuck where in Bayfield?
I'm not sure exactly where, which worried me. So I called a couple of my friends to see if one of them could pick him up, and then I would come up to Durango and get him.
On cross, counsel mentioned there was a contested hearing in September in which primary custody was awarded to you.
Yes.
Is that after the Labor Day trip?
Yes.
And you mentioned on cross-examination that you recall the defendant booking the November trip on the same day you were awarded custody.
I do remember, yes.
Switching gears here, okay?
Okay.
Counsel asked you if the reason Dylan did not want to go to his father's house for the November trip was due to a couple reasons. And he talked about being at the end of the road in the middle of nowhere, and said that was one of the reasons. Is that right?
Yes.
Then talked about Dylan not wanting to sit around the house, and that was another reason.
Yes.
Fair to say there were others that you're aware of based on your discussions with Dylan?
Yes.
At the end of the cross, counsel asked you if you were aware of the compromising photos.
Yes.
And whether Dylan was aware of the compromising photos. Was he?
Yes.
What impact did they have on Dylan, to your knowledge?
He was devastated. It was humiliating to him. It was embarrassing.
You were shown an exhibit, now admitted into evidence, 1872. This was in, I believe it was February of 2013.
Okay.
Dylan goes missing, and you don't hear from him again, November 18th, 2012.
Okay.
All through Thanksgiving, December, January. And then this picture, if I recall correctly, was taken in February.
Yes.
What was the purpose of this visit to the defendant's house?
Trying to get answers, trying to get movement, trying to get something that would help us find Dylan. Answers from Mark. We weren't getting.
During that time, you're also trying to get, or you're seeking answers about where your son's going.
Yes.
Counsel asked you a number of questions about later discussions you had with individuals in which you stated you believed the defendant was responsible for Dylan's disappearance.
Yes.
And then I'm going to switch gears one last time on you, okay? And just more for clarification than anything, the bag, which is introduced, or admitted into evidence as People's 13, contains articles of clothing and the pillow and pillowcase that belong to them.
Yes.
And counsel had asked you some questions before the lunch break about that, and I just want to make sure I clarify.
Okay.
Those were items that you provided to law enforcement as scent articles or things that may contain Dylan's smell.
Objection, foundation. I don't know if she knows the purpose.
She was asked by law enforcement to get that sort of thing, was what the testimony was this morning, so I think the foundation. Go ahead.
Dylan's smell for the purpose of canine searches.
Yes.
Then I should have clarified this earlier, but I realized during cross that I should clarify it. And then you also provided other items for possible DNA analysis.
Yes.
You had mentioned earlier the CBI, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation.
Yes.
And the ballistics that's been introduced into evidence one such item.
Yes.
Did you also provide a baby tooth of Dylan's for that purpose?
Yes.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any questions from the jury? Okay. Ms. Hall, there's a question, but I do not want you to answer it. Okay, I'm just reading this into the record.
Okay.
When Mr. Redwine texted, he said he left the marshal's office, implying he went in person. When you called and asked if Mr. Redwine called, they said no. Were they assuming your question? Were they answering your question, or was the marshal's office saying he never made any contact with him? This is something that Ms. Hall really wouldn't have any personal knowledge of. It'd have to be a question for somebody else to answer. So I'm not going to let her answer the question. But with that, I know she'll be here. So, can you see when she'll be?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
She's not under service from us, Judge.
All right, you can step down.
Thank you.
Your next witness?
People call Ron Armstrong to the stand.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Armstrong, if you come up to the witness stand up here next to me, please. Yeah. And if I could have you raise your right hand before you sit down. Do you solemnly swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Have a seat, please. Make sure you speak up and talk into the microphone. Go ahead, Mr. Champagne.
Thank you, Judge.
I think it's down. If you speak up, it's good enough.
Better.
You just got to be pointing towards it.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Mr. Armstrong.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good. Can you state your name and spell your name for the record, please?
Yeah, Ronald G. Armstrong,
How do you spell your last name?
Armstrong.
Okay. And if you have any trouble with any of my questions or hearing me, anything like that, just let me know, okay?
Okay.
Great. Tell us just a little bit about yourself, sir. Where are you from?
Twin Falls, Idaho.
How long you've lived in this area?
In this area, about 18 years, 20 years, I think.
Okay. And what kind of work do you do?
I was a general contractor, but I'm retired now.
Okay. And were you working as a general contractor in 2012, 2011, that time period?
Yeah.
What was the name of your company?
RAC Restoration Services, Inc.
Okay. I want to focus you in now on our case. Did you take a job relating to work with Mark Redwine?
Yes, I did.
And do you remember the address of the home?
No, I don't.
Okay. Was it in the Vallecito area, to the best of your memory?
Yes.
Okay. And tell us about the nature of that work.
Well, his house had caught on fire, so we completely rebuilt it back up. The structure was still good, but we had to do a lot of the restoration on the smoke damage and fire damage to it. And that's basically what we did.
Okay. And you said the structure was still good, but there was a lot of smoke damage and that type of damage.
Yeah.
I want to just take a quick step back. I think we do need to establish the address a little more clearly. Do you remember doing a building permit for that address?
Yes.
If I showed you that building permit, would it refresh your recollection to the address?
Yes.
I've got exhibit number 193, page 2. Counsel, I'm going to approach, if I may, Judge.
You may. So this is the building permit or the CO?
Second page, which is the building permit.
Oh, okay.
193.
Yeah.
And sir, I'm just directing your attention to the top corner there. Does that refresh your recollection as to the address?
I'm still not sure of the new address. I had so many jobs going on at the time, I
Okay.
can't remember everything.
But you reviewed this document, and it states, well, do you remember the name of the customer or who was seeking the permit?
Should have been Mark Redwine.
Okay, is that what you saw on this document?
Yeah,
Okay. And then it listed the address below, is that correct?
I think so. I didn't look at it in detail.
Okay. We'll get there in a second. You said that the house had caught fire, and that you did the interior work to make it livable again. Is that correct?
We did some exterior work too. We had to take off part of the roof, trusses and stuff. Okay. So we did an extensive rework of the house.
And was replacing the floor a part of that task, part of the job? And do you recall being contacted by law enforcement about this case?
No, I don't.
Do you recall being asked if you still had the invoice related to the flooring materials?
I was asked by your team.
Okay. And were you able to find that receipt or the invoice, excuse me?
Yeah, it's right there in the file.
Okay. Have you had a chance to review that?
Vaguely over the last couple of years.
Okay. And how did you find this invoice? Meaning, like, was it in your files?
My wife probably found it somewhere. I'm not sure.
Okay. Did you keep materials like this related to the job and work that you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
For 7 years anyway.
Okay. Was that part of your regular business activities to keep these invoices?
Yes.
And were you a part of the team that was in charge of keeping these records?
Yes, I was the owner.
Okay. At this point, Judge, I'd like to approach with Exhibit 191.
All right.
So I'm handing you a copy of what's been marked as Exhibit number 191. Do you recognize it?
Yeah, that's the materials I picked up for the hardwood floor.
For Mark Redwine's house?
Yes.
Okay.
That's from Lumber Liquidators in Albuquerque.
And is there a signature on that document?
Yes, sir, it's mine.
That's your signature?
Yes.
Okay. And is this document in the same or substantially the same condition as when you originally received it and filed it?
What's that?
Is this document in the same condition as when you filed it?
I believe so.
Okay. At this point, we'd move to admit number 191.
Mr. Moran? Submitted.
Okay. Permission to publish to the jury?
Sure.
Bear with us. We're just going to put this up on the big screen TV. Behind you, I'm showing the exhibit that you have in front of you. When you look down at the exhibit or up on the screen, does it show the name of your company on this invoice?
Yes, RAC Restoration Services.
Okay, and that's in the top left corner of the document?
Yes.
And as I look down through the document, does it have a date across from your, I'm sorry, it's actually on the right side of the document. Document date, you see that?
Document date is 12/2/210.
Okay, and is that when you, in fact, receive or purchase these materials, receive this invoice?
Probably, yes.
And as we scroll down, it says item product, and it says 10 red oak. What is that?
What is it? Where is it?
Sorry, it's the first product on the invoice section.
It's redwood oak, 3 by 2 1/4 inch hardwood floor.
Okay. And is that the flooring that you actually installed in Mark Redwine's home?
I saw the, excuse me, what was that?
Is that the flooring that you actually installed at Mark Redwine's house?
Myself and my crew.
Okay. And do you remember doing the job?
Yes.
As we look down a little farther at the bottom there, that's your signature as you've described it?
Yes, it is.
When you finish a job like this, well, let me step back. When you're working a job like this, is the home habitable? Are people allowed to live in the house?
Like what now? I can barely hear you.
Is the home habitable when you're doing this type of a project?
No.
And this type of project requires permits from the county, is that correct?
Correct.
And after a job like this is finished, is there any documentation that's required before someone returns to living in the home?
Correct.
What is the name of that document?
It's called a certificate of occupancy.
And have you in fact reviewed the certificate of occupancy for this house?
Yes.
Okay. If I may approach with exhibit number 193.
Yes.
Okay.
Sir, what is that document in front of you?
It's a certificate of occupancy, which is which allows the owner to move back into the property because it's been rebuilt.
And we're moving to admit exhibit 193 at this point, Your Honor.
Mr. Moran? Admitted.
What is the date on the certificate of occupancy, sir?
Looks like April 22nd, 2011
And the address?
is 2343 County Road 500,
And the owner of that address?
Mark Redwine.
Thank you. No further questions for this witness.
Any cross?
Just one more moment. I think that we're all in agreement on this gentleman is asking. Just a little clarification. Good afternoon, sir. My name is John Moran. I represent Mr. Redwine. The work that you did on the house was complete before the certificate of occupancy was signed. Is that right?
Yes.
And there was actually some time that the house would have been habitable, but the certificate just was not made available by the county. Is that right?
I can't understand you. I'm sorry.
You're not the first. The certificate of occupancy was provided sometime after the house was livable. Fair?
Usually.
That it took a while to get the county in there to give the final official certificate, right?
Yes.
And the county gets to be sort of picky about little things on occasion. Is that fair?
I can't say that, but
Okay. Things like the fan isn't properly installed, light switches on the wrong side of the door, that kind of stuff?
oh yeah,
So not anything that would make the place dangerous or unlivable.
right.
At what point was the house no longer dangerous, if you remember?
Whatever says on the certificate of occupancy or thereabouts.
Would you agree that there was some point prior to that, after your work, the bulk of your work was complete?
Yeah.
Okay. And sir, your authorization to proceed with work, that was signed on April 14th, 2010. Do you recall?
What was that question?
The authorization to proceed with work, that's a document you have your customers sign, right?
Yes, before we start the work.
And that document was signed on April 14th, 2010, right?
I am not sure.
Sir, would it refresh your recollection to look at your contract?
What was that?
Would it refresh your recollection to look at your authorization?
Sure.
May I approach?
You may.
Okay, that's my,
And it's April of 2010, correct?
I don't know.
Next to your signature,
Yeah,
sir?
April, or 4/14/10.
Thank you. Did your work take years to complete at that house? How long after the authorization to proceed with work did your job take on this house?
Sometime before the certificate of occupancy.
Okay, it's
I'm not
been a
sure.
while. All right, I'll leave it at that, sir. Thank you. One more. This was not the sort of project that would have taken months and months and months and months. After the authorization to proceed with work, you get in there and get the job done. Is that fair?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Any questions from the jury? And can Mr. Armstrong be excused?
Yes.
I guess you can. So, Mr. Armstrong, you're free to go. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Do you want this certificate?
Just leave it right there. Just leave it down. Leave it.
Okay.
Next witness?
People could call Carrie Cochrane to the stand.
Before you sit down, Ms. Cochran, would you raise your right hand for me, please?
Okay. I am deaf.
Okay. I talk too fast. Raise your right hand.
Okay.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And make sure you speak into the microphone. Have a seat.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
I am Carrie Jean Cochrane. I'm 60 years old, was born in Atlanta, Georgia. I am completely deaf. I have one cochlear implant on the right side. Nothing here.
And if we speak slowly and into the microphone,
Yes.
is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay. If at any time you can't understand me or have trouble, please let me know.
Will do.
Where do you currently live?
Where did I live?
Where do you live now?
I live now below Tucson, Arizona,
How long have you lived there?
since 2016
Okay. And where did you live before that?
in Vallecito.
Okay. And how long did you live in Vallecito?
I moved there in 2002, and I left in 2016.
What was your address when you lived there?
2400 County Road 500,
Did you have neighbors?
Yes.
Was Mark Redwine one of your neighbors?
Yes.
How far away from Mark Redwine's house did you live?
About 100 yards, maybe more.
Okay. Could you see his house from your house?
Yes.
Could you see his house while you were inside your house?
Yes.
Describe that for us.
My house was long, ranch style. His house was on the opposite side of County Road 500, 100 yards down the way. And at certain windows, if I just looked, I could see it.
Okay. Was it a fairly clear sight line, or were there a lot of trees between the two?
In the summer, there were some bushes, but I could always basically see that front stoop or porch.
Okay. Could you see his house specifically from your bedroom?
Yes.
I want to turn your attention to the night of November 18th, 2012. Do you remember that night?
Yes, I do.
Was there anything unusual that night regarding Mark Redwine's house?
Only that. I got up around 2 o'clock in the morning, used the bathroom, came back. Sometimes I have a tendency to peek out the window, and I noticed the porch light was on, and it was noticeable just because it had been dark for, it felt like months. He'd been gone for a while, and it was completely dark.
So Mark had been gone. Your understanding was that he was not living in the house or at the house?
No, it just seemed nobody was there.
For months.
Completely dark, and it is very dark out there.
And then on this night, you did notice that his light was on?
Yes, I got up later on, and I don't think the sun was up yet. Maybe between 6:30 and 7, I'm not certain, but it was off.
Let me take a step back. So in the middle of the night, you said around 2 a.m.
Yes.
You got up and you looked and saw that his light was on.
Yes.
How did you know that it was 2 a.m.?
There is I don't have light in my room, but the room across the hall where my bathroom is, I kept a digital clock that's very visible, so sometimes I would glance at it. And when I went back into the room and noticed the light was on, I just went and looked back to see what time it was, and that's why I knew it was around 2 o'clock.
Okay. And then you said when you got up in the morning, you said it was around 6:30 or 7 a.m.
Yes.
And what did you notice about the light?
It was just off.
The light was back off at that
Yes.
time. One moment, please.
Yes.
Do you remember being contacted by law enforcement back in 2012 about this topic?
Yes.
And do you recall giving a report to the same effect you've described today?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. I have no further questions for you.
Thank you.
Any cross?
Good afternoon, Ms. Cochran.
Good afternoon.
I've been made aware that it's hard to hear me, so please let me know.
I will do that.
Thank you. And the microphone does help, but if I...
Yes, it does.
Okay, sweet. You are friends with Elaine Hall, correct?
Yes, we were acquaintances, yes.
And when we reached out to you to speak about seeing the light on, you refused to speak with us, correct?
Yes.
What you informed us is that you would not speak with defense counsel, so we weren't able to take photographs from your house, right?
I assume so, yes.
Okay. I do want to go over photographs that law enforcement took, and if I might approach, Your Honor, I'll provide the witness with the defense exhibits 1136. Through 1144.
Thank you, Mr. Moran.
I would give you my copy, but I can't see that far.
I understand, it's fine. And Judge, we'll stipulate to admission of these photographs, that's fine.
Okay. Did you want to admit it then, Mr. Moran? All right. 1136 through 1137 are admitted. Excuse me, 1144.
So, Ms. Cochran, it might make sense to have you, can you hear me?
So far.
Great. If you would, take a look through these just briefly so you can be acquainted with them as I go through them. And for the record, what I have here is Defense Exhibit 1136, 1137, 1139, skipping 1138, 1140, 1141, and 1142, and 1143, 1144.
So you're not going to admit 1138?
No.
All right. 1138 is not admitted.
What 1138 was repetitive.
Okay. Well, that's fine. Go ahead.
Ms. Cochran, were you aware law enforcement was there? Were you still living at Vallecito when these photographs were taken January 5th, 2020?
2020?
Yes, ma'am.
I was not there in 2020.
I see. So law enforcement did not need to approach you to ask if they could take these photographs?
No,
I see. Is this, referring here to Defense Exhibit 1136, that's the one on the top, hopefully. Does this photograph look familiar? Are you familiar with the scene depicted in this image? And this is facing...
House, it was right next door to me in a lot. I'm here.
And I think that that Chevrolet parked there is a law enforcement vehicle. But otherwise, you recognize this scene?
Yes.
Okay. Permission to publish?
Yes. And you have permission to publish all of these since they've been admitted.
I would have done better when everyone was using feather pens. Thank you. Tech-savvy people are probably thinking I have too many windows open. At any rate, so this is what we were just discussing, fair?
Yes.
And this is the view from essentially out in front of your house, facing towards Mr. Redwine's house, correct?
Yes.
And looker's right. So as you look down the road, his house will be on the right.
I'm here. Down there. He's on this side, on the right. Yes.
Thank you. And then if I could have you take a look at 1137. This is there's one in front of you as well, whichever you prefer to look at. So this is your old place?
Yes.
Okay. And your bedroom window is the window that's on the left side of the house?
Far side, yes.
Correct. Okay, so north side. And then, not having a chance to speak with you, I didn't get to discuss 1139 with you beforehand, but this is an image that was provided to us by the prosecution.
Okay, I didn't get that last part.
This is an image provided to us by the prosecution.
Okay, yes.
One of the law enforcement officials here took this photograph. Can you see that sort of through the trees there? Can you make out with this image that that's
All
Mr. Redwine's house?
Yeah, it was kind of a grove.
Between your house and Mr. Redwine's?
So to speak. on the side of his house.
Okay. And can you see that that's his green paint on the house and black roof? If you look through the trees there.
I think this is kind of a deceptive photograph because of where my house was, you would have to be down there kind of on the side where he was. And yes, but you would have to be in towards that grove.
Okay.
I was far enough out that I could see. That's close to the grove that was, you know, kind of beside him, but yet set back.
Okay. I'll let the law enforcement official know you think this is deceptive. If I could have one.
You can see an outline, yeah, but it wasn't that crowded. That view was not that crowded to me where I was.
I was worried to go in your yard. I didn't take it, but
Okay.
it's trees that you're generally familiar with what we're looking at.
Okay.
1140. And do you recognize this?
Yes, that's my house. That's my bedroom.
So your bedroom window is captured in the photograph. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the window that you would have looked out?
Yes.
Okay. And then again, there's sort of off in the distance, off on the right, that's Mr. Redwine's house, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then, having been neighbors with Mr. Redwine, do you recall for how long?
Or how long I was neighbors with him?
Yes, ma'am.
I can't really say that, you know.
Long enough that you would have an opportunity to observe the 36-inch stickers on his front door?
Stickers on his front door.
Yes, ma'am.
I do not remember any stickers on his front door
And
before.
you
I didn't
would
look
agree
that way
that
very often. I didn't look that way very often.
I see. You were not keeping close tabs on Mr.
No.
Redwine. I see. But there was only one door on the front of that house. Does that sound familiar?
Yes. And then the two garage doors. Yes.
I could have 1141. So are you familiar with this? It looks like
Yes.
the house has been zoomed in on in this photograph. Would you agree?
Porch light.
And that's the front door of Mr.
Yes.
Redwine's house. And that's the only entrance on that side of the house.
Yes.
And it's got a porch light above it. That's the porch light that
Yes,
we're
you can
talking
see
about.
the porch light.
And there was nothing obstructing your view of that porch light?
No, not really. But you have to understand, it's incredibly dark up there.
Understood. And given that folks are sort of neighborly up there, you were aware that Mr. Redwine was working in the oil fields and as an over-the-road trucker. Is that fair?
I just understood he was a trucker, you know.
So it made sense, and you understood about your neighborhood, that the neighbor who lived to the south of you was someone who would be away for periods of time.
Yes.
And you never became aware that his lights were on a timer, right?
I never became aware of.
His lights were not on a timer as far as you know, correct?
No, I mean, when he was there, they would be on. I didn't look at it out of habit in time every time his light was on, no. You
Sure.
know, yes, it was just that it was noticeable this time because he had been gone for a very long time, and it's so dark. And when I looked out, I was like, oh, you know.
So we know at a minimum that he was home with his child on Labor Day. Are you saying that he was out of town longer than that? When you say a really long time, are you talking about a few days, a few weeks?
I can't tell you how long he was gone, just that it was a long time.
Sure. And given that it was so dark out there, when he was home and would turn the light on, it would really stand out, right?
Yes.
Okay. And it had been some time that he was away, so when he was there and had a guest, the light would be on, right?
Yes.
And you didn't observe any other lights on, just that outside light,
Yes.
correct?
just that one porch light.
Do you recall, and I know it's been some time, but do you recall that Mr. Redwine stacked wood on his front porch?
I'm sure he did. A lot of people do that up there, but it wasn't, the only thing that I remember definitely was that he would have a grill sometimes on this stuff. But I don't, you know, recall, but he could have.
Ms. Cochran, you did not see Dylan Redwine at the house on November 19th, right?
No.
And how long prior to the 19th was it that you had seen Dylan at the house?
You know, quite a long time. I can't give you definite, it's sketchy.
Sure, I understand that, and that makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Was the first time you remember being interviewed by an investigator in this case after the 1-year anniversary of Dylan's disappearance?
Was that the first time I remember being questioned? Is that what you're saying?
By an investigator. I think that they did a door-to-door canvas, but yeah. Do you remember that the more in-depth one occurred on the 1-year anniversary? I
really don't. I don't remember, but I do remember being talked to twice. But don't ask me dates.
Okay. Do you recall that the second interview came sometime after the disappearance?
Sometime, yes.
After there had been police vehicles outside of Mr. Redwine's house?
Now, are you talking about 10 days after or much later?
However often you saw law enforcement.
Say 10 days after, yes, I saw a lot of police vehicles.
Okay. And then did you see law enforcement outside the house any time thereafter, before you were interviewed by the investigator?
No, but I'm not somebody who's always looking out the window. They could have been there and I missed them completely. They were there and gone and I didn't see them.
Okay. Do you remember that there had been a nationally televised program about this case in the interim before you spoke to the investigator?
Objection, Judge. We're way beyond the scope, and I think we're treading into some dangerous waters here.
What's the point of this, Mr. Brian?
Permission to approach.
Sure. Go ahead, Ms. Rand.
Do you recall that there had been a protest outside Mr. Redwine's house?
Yes.
And do you recall that the investigator came to speak with you after the protest?
I actually don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Do you recall that sometime around the protest and that winter that you became reacquainted and closer with Elaine Hall?
I spoke to her just in saying I'm sorry, but I wouldn't say that we reconnected and, you know, we're very close, but yes.
Okay. Were you asked to keep an eye on the house?
No.
Mr. Redwine's house?
No.
Okay.
Not that I remember. Please don't.
On that occasion, is it a fair understanding?
Which occasion, please?
Just about to go there. On the evening of November, I'm sorry, the early morning of November 19th, did you see Mr. Redwine driving up and down out of his driveway? Did you observe any vehicle traffic?
No, I wasn't
And
paying attention that way.
with as dark as it is up there, vehicles are sort of noticeable, especially around 2 in the morning, right?
Well, yeah, but I did not see a vehicle, only the porch light.
And didn't see any movement or activity out in that front yard that was illuminated with the
And
porch
if you're
light?
talking about an observation in that way, at any other time, it wouldn't be detailed. I could see figures moving, but it was never very much. But at that particular day, no, just the porch light.
Mr. Redwine parked his vehicles in his driveway, right?
For the most part, yes, yes.
And the street is so narrow, you would not park vehicles on County Road 500 near your house. Is that right?
On the street, like in front, maybe temporarily, but yeah, the shoulders were so that it would be difficult. Maybe temporarily somebody might.
You mentioned to investigator, well, I'll withdraw that. I think that's it. Thank you. I appreciate your patience, ma'am.
Okay.
Mr. Champagne?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. You mentioned that, let's see, defense counsel asked you when the last time you saw Dylan Redwine at Mark Redwine's house, and you said you weren't sure.
I am not.
And that's fine.
Because it was just visits, you know.
Well, tell us about how you know Dylan Redwine.
I was doing some front yard work and moving some dirt and putting it through a strainer and taking the time to pick out the earthworms because I was going to put them in the garden soil in the bed. And this little kid zooms up on his bike and just gets off and comes over and squats down, didn't say a word. I just said, hi. He probably said, hi. And then I said, I'm picking out the earthworms, and we just picked out earthworms in the church. So, and then he just disappeared. He was like a little phantom. He would come and go.
Was that the first time you met him?
Yes.
Did you have other encounters with him over the years?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
One day it was raining, and I had made some lime pops, and I just said, you want a lime pop? Yeah, and I set him up on my computer, and he played Bejeweled, and I saw his bike in my backyard one day and saw that he was in the pen with my two dogs. He was in the dog bed, and they were all over him licking him. And he brought over some friend's little dachshund because he wanted me to see this little dog one day. He didn't speak much. But...
Did he actually come inside your house?
Oh, yes.
How many times?
Your Honor,
Oh.
Hold on, please.
for a moment, but we're going to let it go, but this is beyond the scope at this point.
It is beyond the scope, Mr. Champagne, and that's, you can tell me why I should continue.
Your Honor, defense counsel went well beyond the scope when they were asking questions
Right,
about the
and
last
you
time.
did not object, so I didn't do anything. 'Cause
Right.
I thought maybe you wanted it in.
Yes.
I don't want it in now, and it's beyond the scope, so why should I let it go forward?
Well, I'm trying to establish her knowledge level and understanding, but I'll move on. That's fine, Judge. One final question on the topic.
No, not on that topic. It's
Okay.
beyond the scope.
Fine. Thank you, Judge. You said defense counsel was asking you questions about when you were interviewed by law enforcement in the case and inferring that it was a year after November 18th. Does that sound correct to you?
Yes, I remember being interviewed pretty much right after, and then a long period had passed. If it was a year, I don't know. I'm one of those people that doesn't keep up with dates or time, so I just know there was a large gap.
Do you remember the name of the investigator that interviewed you?
Tanya Goldbright?
And you said that, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said it was actually fairly close in time to Dylan's disappearance?
I'm sorry, it was actually, the first time, yes, it was close after the disappearance, yes.
Okay. And do you remember the date?
No, I do not.
If I showed you a copy of her report, would that perhaps refresh your recollection?
Yes.
This is page 59 of Discovery. Awesome.
Thank you.
After you finish reading
yes, that sounds about right.
What is your recollection?
Of her questioning me?
About the date.
About the date. The date that she came and questioned me?
Yes.
Just that, she came inside, told me who she was, and then I invited her in, and she just asked me questions.
Do you remember when that occurred? What day, what month, roughly?
No, probably about the 24th.
Of which month?
November.
November.
Yes.
So within a couple of weeks after Dylan's disappearance.
Within, yes. I'm sorry to not be more definite. It does just a long time ago.
And then you were interviewed again later.
Yes.
So you were interviewed more than once.
Yes.
You were asked questions about whether you recall a wood stack out in front of Mark Redwine's house.
Yes.
You described that you don't recall a wood stack per se, but he did have items on his front porch.
Yes.
Did any of those items ever obstruct your view of his nightlight or his porch light?
Oh, not the light, no, because the light was high. I'm talking about something waist high.
Thank you. One moment, please. Permission to approach the witness with exhibit number 27.
Yes.
And do you recognize that picture?
Yes.
And is it a fair and accurate representation of the perspective from your bedroom window to Mark Redwine's house?
Yes.
Move to admit People's 27.
Mr. Moran? Admitted.
Move to publish, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ma'am, can you describe what we're seeing here in this photograph?
Yes, that would be about what I saw when I looked down my window. There's the door, and there's the light.
If I were to ask you to point to where the light is on that photograph with this pointer, would you be able to do that?
Oh, okay, get up. Dark, but it's right there. It's like the shadow of it, because it was right by the door.
And you're pointing to a spot that's on the left half of the picture, right about.
Coming out of the door, the porch light is going to be here on the right.
Thank you. Have a seat. That's Defense Exhibit 1139. And is that the picture that you described as deceptive as far as your...
Because I know his house is through there, but you would have to be down there on that side. That's not what I saw from my house.
So the picture 1139 that Defense Counsel introduced...
Yeah, and remember, there is a lot of aspens. There's even a whole grove back here. There were a lot of aspens across the field, but they were kind of back from the road.
But Defense Exhibit number 1139, that is not an accurate description of your perspective.
Yeah, no, I would have to go down there and go to the side where his house was in order to be obstructed by these trees.
Okay. But Exhibit number 27, People's Exhibit 27, is that fair and accurate from your viewpoint?
Is it this right here? Yes, that would be more like it.
And all this is to say, could you see his light on November 18th?
Oh, yes, definitely.
No further questions.
Any other questions from the jury? Bring it up, Cindy. Mr. Moran, you want to come up? Mr. Champagne?
Thank you, Judge.